So picking up from the last video, we have now dropped in the open purchase order, which we've said is T10. So that's basically, we've put in a select statement here, which we have then given a name to, which we've basically called that field T10. And we have said that that is joined to OCRD, the T0 table, by means of the card code. And we've made that a left join, so that there may or there may not be a purchase order outstanding on this T10 table for any given supplier. So we put it in the select statement. We then therefore need to put it in the group by as well, because in this instance we're not doing any aggregate, we're not counting or subtotaling this field. Rather, we have already done that within our select statement here. So all that we're doing in this instance excuse me, is bringing the result out to our main query excuse me, which means that we have to drop it into the group by statement. Just to prove that we do have to do that, if we execute without, we get an error message, and then if we put it back in, we get a result. So now we have a list of supplier codes, the date upon which they were created, the last invoice or the most recent invoice date on the system, and then the count of the number of open purchase orders we have against each supplier. So if we scroll down our list, then we can see that, for example, we have 3 outstanding purchase orders against this supplier. We go look at them, and sure enough, we have 3 outstanding purchase orders open on the system. We could, if we wanted to, then use the filter function within queries, and we could say we want to look for the last invoice date where that date is smaller than today minus 3 years. So today is the 25th of June, and if we go back 3 years from 2018 to 2015, we filter, apply that filter, and we're now looking at the list of all suppliers where the last purchase invoice date was prior to that day in 2015. We'll see that on a few of those accounts, if we were to sort that, we can find that we have some, well, we only have 2 accounts where there are open purchase orders, even though we haven't had purchase invoices in over 6 years. If we drill in on that, we will find that we still have an open purchase order against them, so we need to deal with that. We either close the purchase order, cancel it, whatever, but we need to get it out of the list. Okay, so that's a useful report, and we would normally then just save that report into one of our areas. So if I just go to my area here, and I have already got this report saved as last supplier last invoice date and open purchase orders. Okay, so that's that report dealt with. Another report that we talked about on the day was we'd like to see a list of open purchase orders, and we would like to see their status in relation to goods receipts and purchase invoices, whether or not we've received a goods receipt note or whether we have a purchase invoice. And we've already started the process of writing that report, so I'll just come back in here, and I've got purchase order, goods received note, and purchase invoices. And I've just put in a little note at the beginning of the report here to indicate what the report is, what it's doing basically, and then who created it and what day they created it. And then if I had to make changes in the future, I would come in here, I would edit, and I would say something like this. And just put in the day that I edit the report. So, and perhaps then also just what I actually did, what changes I made to the report, if any. Well, in this case, of course, there will be changes. So this report then, if I just actually click on the little arrow there, I can see what the actual report looks like, and it is a bit daunting to look at it initially, but if we break it down into its various components, it shouldn't be so bad. So we are, I suppose the easiest thing I find is if we just actually isolate the from part of the statement first of all. And we take down the where part of the statement as well. And we have an order by in there also. So we've got information which we're pulling from OPOR, which is our purchase orders. POR1 is our purchase order detail lines. We have PDN, which is our goods receipt POs and the header for that table, and PCH, which is our purchase invoices lines, and OPCH is the purchase invoices headers. So the way that we're working this report is we want to look from the purchase order through to the goods receipt, and from the goods receipt through to the purchase invoice. And in each of those cases, so if we look at this report, in each case we would find that if we drill in on the purchase order, we can see then whether or not that purchase order has a relationship to a goods receipt. And in this case, we'll see one purchase order, one goods receipt, two purchase invoices, and the numbers were 23,494 and 24,558 on the purchase invoices. And if we can pull that back up out of the way for a moment. So we were looking at purchase order number 10808, and sure enough, if we scroll across, we will see that we have the one goods receipt there, 7451, and then if we look over here, we'll see that we have two different purchase invoice numbers, which are the numbers ending 494 and 558 respectively. So we've got the joins working. Now, how did we actually do that? Well, we started at the end and worked back, basically. So if I look at this report, what I'm actually doing is I'm starting with my purchase order table and connecting the header and the detail. Then I go to the goods receipt PO, which is the PDN1, and I'm putting that in as a table 2, or T2 in the report, so T0, T1, T2, and then the join is based on looking at the goods receipt PO, and in the base reference of each line of the goods receipt, there is a reference to the, if you like, the parent document or the source document for that transaction, which in our instance would be a field, the doc entry field on POR1. So basically every goods receipt should have come from a purchase order. So that's what this is about. And then each line of the goods receipt should relate to a line of the purchase order, which is this bit here. Then I'm also saying that I want that to ensure that we have the base type equal to 22. In other words, I'm always looking to see where the goods receipt PO parent document or source document is a purchase order. So base type is 22. So in other words, the type of document it's coming from was a purchase order. In a similar fashion, then on the purchase invoices, I have done something similar where I've said on the purchase invoices line, their source ought to be table T2, which is the goods receipt PO line and the line number, and then where the line or where the transaction type was 20, which is the goods receipts. And when we do that, then we get a result back like this. So then we can see in these cases, for example, we have purchase orders. There's no value on these orders open, which would suggest to me that if we drill in on the transaction and the purchase order is closed, if we look at the relationship map, we'll see that it's just a purchase order, so it's been closed without any processing of a goods receipt or a purchase invoice. So if we look at some lines down here, then, for example, we've already looked at line 10808, and that has copied through correctly. So then it's a matter of just what fields we want to actually see and how we want to see them on the report, and that's really where we kind of get into the area of looking at things like cases. So this is a when statement. In programming terms, it might be more familiar to call it an if statement. So SQL calls it when a particular condition is met. In other programs, it might be called an if statement. So typically they're called if then else statements. This is called a when then else statement. So basically when the quantity type, or sorry, when the quantity is not 0, then we're going to take the line total and divide it by the quantity. Because we can't divide by a quantity of 0, that's why we put in this condition here. And when we have that, basically the line total divided by the quantity gives us a unit price or unit rate after discount, and we divide that by the open quantity, in other words the quantity remaining outstanding on the document. Otherwise we're just going to bring back a 0 value, and we call that field the open purchase order value. So in the field above here, you'll see that you have the open quantity as the open amount, the open quantity on the purchase order. And we're carrying on that similar format then. So we have on T3, which is our goods receipt PO header, we have the doc number, and we're calling that the GRN number. Then we take out the quantity as the quantity received on each row of a goods receipt note. Then we have the open CRE quantity, which is basically the amount yet to be invoiced on a goods receipt PO. And we take that open CRE quantity and multiply it by a rate to give us an uninvoiced value. And then of course we're looking for the actual invoice numbers and the quantity on the invoice and the total of each line of the invoice. So that is giving us a report which I think for the most part is providing useful information. We have then isolated that to look at only transactions which are in the current year. So we're looking at purchase orders where the year, or the date on the purchase order, the year of that date is the same as whatever the current year is. And we're also looking to ensure that it's not a cancelled purchase order. So we want to exclude or cancelled POs from this report. Now, it is possible, of course, that we do not want to exclude cancelled purchase orders, so we'd have to do some testing to see. It's possible, I guess, that a purchase order may have been partially processed, so we have some goods receipts against it, and then after that we decide to cancel the remainder of the purchase order. So maybe no bad thing to actually look to see whether or not a purchase order has been cancelled at some point in its life. And that would be a good example to actually illustrate how we can go about showing whether a purchase order has been cancelled or not. So if we just take that, for example, copy that, and if we come up here to a purchase order number, and then we say a case, so when this is equal to Y, then so then that's telling us whether or not we have any cancelled purchase orders on the system. And there we go, we have 2 cancelled purchase orders, and we can drill in, we can find those, and if we wanted to we can quickly check to see that sure enough they have no further transactions against them. So they've gone nowhere. There's been no goods receipts or anything else against them. But just to also helps to illustrate that function about using a case when statement on the system. So we'll cover more of that in detail on our next training session.